I got back into game dev after 6 years by entering my first game jam. When I was younger, I learnt how to make games. By following online tutorials, I learnt how to use GameMaker 1 to make little games I would send to my friends. I really enjoyed it, but the passion eventually petered out, so I would start a new project with a grand idea, work on it for about a week, and then give up on it because the scope was too big and I wanted to make something else instead. I've always wanted to get back into it since then. This year would be the year, I decided. I felt determined to give it my best shot, and a lot has changed since 2018. Anyway, with my newfound determination, I set about learning Godot 4. I found some nice tutorials that I was following along with, and everything was going great. But as each week passed, my time spent practicing became less and less until I stopped completely. My motivation had run out. But then, fate intervened. The ever-knowing YouTube algorithm served me a mini documentary about hit game Balatro's creation, which really inspired me. Go watch the video for the full story, but the bits that really stood out to me were how Local Thunk learned via making games he never released. How his original goal for releasing a game was that it would just look good on his CV, and not make millions like Balatro did. In the same week, the Game Development Society at my university announced their next game jam. These are always quite small events, and I would have 3 whole weeks to make a game, so I felt like it would be a good low stakes challenge. So I decided I would make a game for this game jam, and I would use Love 2D, the engine that Local Thunk used to make Balatro. I started working on learning Love 2D and Lua, the language that it uses. I followed a tutorial I found online by a guy called Brooke Miles. It took a couple of evenings just to learn the basics of the language and the engine. I didn't realise when I started, but the tutorial was a work in progress, so when I got to the end I had to figure out how to finish the game by myself, in sort of a draw the rest of the owl moment. I then made a little Minesweeper game. It has a cool panning background, the board can come in a bunch of different sizes, and you can even go full screen, as long as you don't click. Before I knew it, the jam had already begun. The theme was high frequency. I decided to make a mind map. I listed genres of games that would be easy to make, and also listed the ways you could interpret the phrase high frequency. My philosophy for game ideas was to make something with a simple skeleton that by itself could be considered a playable game, and then if I had more time in the jam, I could add to that skeleton to add more and more stuff to the game. This way I wouldn't have to worry too much about the deadline. I came up with some ideas I liked, such as a high frequency of zombies in a tower defense game, a pizza delivery arcade game with a high frequency of customers, or a package delivering puzzle game where you fulfill a high frequency of orders. The world will forever mourn the loss of my spiritual energy factory game that never was. I really like sokoban puzzle games, like Isles of Sea and Sky and Can of Wormholes, so I decided to make a sokoban package delivery game. The first challenge was making levels. Love 2D is entirely code-based, meaning there's no IDE or editor like Unity or Godot where you can just drag and drop things in and build the level that way. It means my options were code the levels myself, build my own level editor, or use a third-party level editor. I chose to use the third-party level editor Tiled in my project, as it seems neat, and on its site has all these games listed as being made with it. It's not the most intuitive software to use, and the user interface does feel like it's 20 years old, but it worked well enough for me. I started by adding a player, walls, boxes and goals. Everything is locked to a strict grid, which the player moves about tile to tile, pushing boxes around and into the goals. I added undo and reset buttons to make the game not torture us. I added a goal counter in the top right, which will do something when the goal is met, and I made some cute pixel art in A-Sprite. Altogether, it looked like this. And that was 1 week of work in about a minute or two. So, with week 1 and the skeleton of my game now done, I focused on adding more objects into the game. I took some more inspiration from Isles of Sea and Sky and added in wires, my version of spikes, levers, my version of the little bells, and holes, my version of holes. I also added some fancy shaders. I wanted to add some cooler objects, so I added in conveyor belts, insta conveyors, water and sponges. When it came to designing levels, for most I started with an idea like teach the player that holes kill them, or teach the player they can push boxes over wires, and I built the level around these ideas. These ones turned out pretty good. I think the best levels though came from questions which I had to ask myself whilst programming the game, like what happens when a box is pushed into a lever, or what happens when a conveyor puts 2 objects on the same tile. The final level is the one I'm most proud of. The player starts in a small cramped room and goes about pushing boxes into goals until they realise that the level says out of 4 in the top right, but there are only 3 goals. I won't spoil the solution. Watching my friends test the game and go through the motions of realising the problem and then having a eureka moment working it out and finding the solution was very fun. Speaking of that, after finishing 10 levels, I decided to get my friends to test the game. The feedback was very positive and the game worked well, that is of course except for the floating boxes, infinite conveyor belt softlocks, permanently disappearing water and boxes pushing levers above them. I fixed the bugs, and based on feedback, I did a little tutorial to the first level. I spent a lot of time adding in boring bits, like a fancy main menu, a serviceable options menu, and an absolutely horrible level select screen. I made some noises into my microphone, found some royalty-free music online, and just like that, it was the end of the jam. I submitted my game and waited for the results. Doing well in the jam was never my main goal, as it was just a small community event, and I was doing this to try to get back into game development. I got some useful feedback, and all in all, I spent about 60 hours working on my game over the 3 weeks, learned a new language and a new engine from scratch, and most importantly, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the whole process start to finish, and for the first time in years, I felt passionate about making games again. The moral of the story is, try to have fun while learning. I think a big reason why I enjoyed learning again was because I was making a game in a genre I really like, and was inspired by the story of Balatro. Also, set small goals. It's easy to set your sight on the peak of the mountain, say you want to release a full game on Steam, but it's much better to go step by step. And also think about how, even if you don't reach your goal, you can still benefit from the experience. Like, even if I hadn't submitted anything for this jam, I would have got a little better at pixel art, or a little better at coding. If you want to try the game for yourself, and see if you can beat the mysterious level 10, then the link is in the description. Feel free to comment what you think of the game. I'm probably not going to go back and update it, but feedback will be useful for future projects. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and consider subscribing. I intend to make more games in the future, and more videos about them, or maybe just videos about game dev in general. So if you're interested in that, stick around. There might be another devlog a lot sooner than you'd expect.